everybody. How are you? Happy Monday. Tawaneus, what on earth are you wearing? Well, it is a costume. It is one of my small purchases from my trip to Pennsylvania. It's actually a doll apron. It happened to fit him. Hello, Druid, my dear. Wow, where'd the weekend go? As always. Maybe you could sit down for a minute. We'll show off your apron later, okay? Okay. Whew. I drove back home this morning. It's not far, I only live 20 miles south of the Pennsylvania line, and I had to go a little bit towards eastern Pennsylvania. It's about a 2-hour drive, so not a big deal. But when you have to start your day off driving, it kind of discombobulates everything. So, I'm kind of like, whew. I came home, had some lunch, had to put water in my ice maker because nobody did it, at least in the past day. So I had a lot of fun in Pennsylvania. Don't know if anybody was able to catch the stream that Jill and I did last night on quilt nerding, but we opened up and did sort of an unboxing of, hey, Quiltish! We did an unboxing of the box under the bed, which sounds like a really very Halloween-y sort of thing. It is not, alas. The box under the bed is kind of this this idea of, quilters collect, or really probably anybody, honestly, that has a hobby or an interest, collected, templates and newspaper clippings and all kinds of, patterns and things, and, put it in a box for reference, and I guess you keep it under the bed. I guess that's where you keep all your things. So anyway, the bed under the box that we had was something Jill won in an auction. Actually, AQSG seminar, she won it, and we went through it. I kind of expected it to be all quilting stuff, and it wasn't. As it turns out, what we think based on the letters, there's a huge stack of letters in there. The letters were addressed to a woman named Marjorie Fitch, and Marjorie was a teenager, young adult in most of the letters. There's one letter from 1932. The rest of them are 1918, 1919, 1920. Marjorie was quite the little society lady. She appeared to have lots of gentlemen friends writing to her. So it was very interesting. And last night I did some research. So I guess we'll probably share that tomorrow on Quilt Nerding. Little anticlimactic, but I did find out what happened to Marjorie, what happened to Charles, or Charlie, the person who wrote her the most. We'll spill those details tomorrow. But as for all of the other stuff in there was clearly, she must have made a number of quilts, because there were a lot of pattern pieces in there, and they were, lots and lots of holes in them, because she had been pinning them to fabric and, doing her thing. So it was pretty clear to me that she probably made a lot of quilts. Double wedding ring seemed to be something she really liked, and things with diamonds. We found a bunch of diamonds, and then I think there was a couple of other pattern pieces in there for stuff I couldn't quite figure out what it looked like, but we didn't have a lot of chance to spread it out. Hey, Miss Fall, long time no see, friend. Glad you made it. So yeah, it was interesting, and this bed under the box concept is so much fun. Oh my goodness. Okay, Druid says on one of the German speaking channels she follows, the streamer reads old letters and diaries. It is so fascinating, and it's kind of like, I feel a little bit like a little voyeuristic. These people are all deceased now, though, so it's it's maybe a little bit easier to read the things, but sometimes it's a little scandalous. And some of the letters these young gentlemen were writing, and they were saying, "Oh, thank you for your lovely little letter." They were a bit forward, I think, for the time period. 1919, 1920. I did find out her birth date was late 1899. I wouldn't call them spicy love letters necessarily, but the one guy kept saying, come visit me in New York City and I'll show you what is meant by a good time. I'll show you what's meant by a good time. Oh my God, that sounds a little like, okay, Charlie. But yes, turn of phrase that some of these young guys used were pretty funny. Anyway, it was good fun. So the trip to Pennsylvania, we talked about it a little bit yesterday, but to recap here, wonder what he meant by that. Yeah, go ahead and keep wondering. So we stayed in this cute little house, and I think Jill wasn't terribly impressed by it, but I thought it was cute. It was a little cottage type place. Literally, like, imagine taking a little Monopoly house and like sticking it in the side of a mountain. And that's where we stayed. The driveway scared the bejesus out of me. I was driving my husband's car, which is a Honda, little tiny Honda, 5-speed, little hatchback, and it's great gas mileage. That's why, I took it. And no kidding, the beginning of the driveway is like this. And if you are not familiar with driving 5-speed or, stick, I've driven stick for a very long time, but still, on a hill like this, it's not easy. So I was like, oh my God, if I have to come up and down this hill over the weekend, I'm probably going to burn the clutch out. So luckily Jill doesn't mind driving. So she was taking us up and down this driveway. A couple of days, our friend Anne stayed with us. And those of you that follow us on Quilt Nerding know we read Anne's book, which was Patchwork Pillowcases. And a lot of fun with her. She... we went antique shopping with her, and we went to a couple museums, and so much fun. We just had a really grand time. So much food. I went up there not thinking much about it. Figured Dunkin' Donuts for breakfast and probably pizza for dinner. But Jill is really good at finding great restaurants. So we had some cuisine. There was this one restaurant, I think it's called Grace's or Gracie's. And it was in, oh boy, I'm drawing a complete blank now. It was not too far from the Mennonite Life Museum. And I want to say that was kind of down, it was not in Lancaster, but kind of down there. But they really love bacon at this restaurant. I think this restaurant's like brand is bacon. And I like some bacon. They had this grilled cheese breakfast sandwich with bacon jam and eggs anyway. So however you want your eggs. And I tend to like an over easy egg or an over medium. Oh my gosh. That sandwich spoiled me for breakfast sandwiches forever. I don't think I can ever eat another breakfast sandwich and feel like it lives up to this bacon jam breakfast sandwich. So, kudos to Grace's or Gracie's. I think it's Gracie's on Main. And then we went to a couple of diners for breakfast. So, delicious waffles. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun. We had tacos. Tacos in Amish country, you would think would not be a good choice. But alas, this restaurant is 100% authentic. And we've eaten there before, and very, very delicious. So it was a trip in, quilty goodness and, all of the things we love and lots of food. We started the trip off on Thursday by visiting the Chester County Historical Society, which is in Westchester, Pennsylvania. It's a suburb of Philadelphia. And there's a quilt show there, which is what we went to see. And they were signature quilts. So for the most part, there was a lot of red and white quilts there. That was interesting. But signature quilts, you guys know, they're quilts that have people's names and dates and stuff on them. Lovely quilts. But not to disparage the quilts, the Chester County Historical Society has something called visible storage. And I don't know if you've ever been to a museum that has visible storage, but what I can tell you, and I've been to a couple, it is probably the most amazing part of anything there, because you think about exhibits and sometimes, things are in a case or something where you can kind of get up close to it, or you could kind of lean over a rope and, to look at something. But a lot of times you're kind of held back. You kind of have to stand back, and you sort of, squint at things. And a lot of times I'll zoom in with my camera and, take a picture so then I can look at it up close on my phone. But visible storage, essentially, and I think they cost museums a lot of money because they're these giant cabinets. I don't even know. I mean, they're big, like bigger than my arms could stretch. And they basically have these drawers that pull out. And depending on what's in them, the drawers may be like this thick, this deep, or they might be very deep. And then they have a layer of plexiglass across the top of them. And so the things are in there, in archival conditions. And I assume that there's some kind of temperature control in this particular room, or maybe the thing itself, the cabinet itself, maybe has some kind of temperature control. I don't know. But the stuff is just in there. And so we saw things like little sewing rolls and like little wallets and things from like late 1700s. Pinballs, not pinball machines, but pinballs, which are, like a kind of a big chunky pin cushion, that the particular ones they have like a sterling silver hoop in the middle with like a thing like you could hang it from a chain, and then the pin cushion is sort of big and poofy on the outside. They must have had like a dozen of them. And then these sewing rolls that are very, very old, oh gosh, probably 24. I mean, just stuffed with stuff. Antique bodices, I'm trying to think, stockings, just all kinds of textile stuff. And we probably spent more time looking in all those drawers than we did looking at the quilts themselves. I hate to say it. But it was also a very good quilt exhibit, and, really some really lovely stuff. And I got some nice pictures. So that was fun. And then that was Thursday. On Friday, it really was. I've never had a bad time in a museum. Even whether it's a big, big museum, tiny museum, I've always found something to be fascinated about. And, I know there's probably museums out there that struggle or maybe don't have very good, curatorial oversight or whatever. But I always feel like museums, even if it's a tiny, tiny, not a lot of funding museum, they do their best to exhibit and portray interesting things and, to educate. I mean, that's what museums are about, is about education today. Back in another time, museums had a little bit different purpose. But today they're by and large about education, and, art museums, of course, are about celebrating art. So, I did learn some things that were very interesting. So on Friday morning, we went to the Mennonite Life Museum. And that's a very small museum, but really good. Like the displays are just kind of one big room, essentially. And they kind of have a divider in the middle to add more display area. But they had like a full like mock-up Mennonite meeting room set up. And apparently often this, in the olden days, so 1800s, the schoolhouse would also, I guess the meeting house and the schoolhouse kind of doubled for each other. So they sort of had one end, like the children's desk and, like this grammatical chart that they would have followed and some other things that were related to school. And then they had the meeting house, like the benches and stuff, and placards that would explain like what happens. And then there in the middle, they have a coffin. I was like, but again, this is about the history of, the Mennonite community there. And they had tons of like houseware type of things. And if you've learned anything thus far about the Pennsylvania German, Pennsylvania Dutch stuff, that area, Amish accepted, tend to have very beautiful things. Mennonite folks are a plainer people, but in terms of the things that they filled their homes with, something as simple as like a wooden canister that sits on the counter is going to be beautifully patterned, beautifully painted. All of their sewing supplies, beautiful stuff. The Amish did did those too. Pin cushions would just be like, pink and bright yellow and, all these beautiful bright colors. And so they had all that, and, they had like a plow and some information about like, growing grain and taking your grain to the granary and all that kind of stuff. So really neat stuff. And I think about when I was a kid, I loved to go to those things, but I feel like, kids are mean and awful. And so to be the cool kid, you kind of have to act like you don't care about that stuff. So I feel I kick the little me when I think of like, you liked this stuff. Why didn't you pay better attention? Because, and try to be less of the cool kid. So after Mennonite Life Museum and some delicious lunch, we went and hit the antique stores in Adamstown. If you might remember, I stayed with Jill up in Adamstown back in the spring and did the circuit of the antique stores. There's essentially this long road, and all it is antique stores, antique stores, antique stores, antique stores. I set a budget for myself this time. I was like, I coming into the holidays, I don't have a lot of funds here. So I did not exceed my budget. You'd be proud of me. In fact, I came in under. Food budget was a different story. But I picked up a few cute little things that I thought were sort of interesting to kind of add to my collections. I know nothing particularly educational, but I'm going to show you what I got. And also on Saturday, we went to a quilt turning. Our friend Barb Garrett does an annual quilt turning, and well, I guess at this point it's annual because I've been to two in October, so this year and last year. She does quilt turnings for sort of some different groups there in Pennsylvania. And this was the Schwenkfelder, which is the Schwenkfelder. I think it's History and something Center. They're a museum also, but they're also kind of a cultural, like they do the genealogy stuff and, education about the Schwenkfelders, which is another community, a small community of people that came from Europe, and, because of religious persecution. So this part of Pennsylvania has a lot of different religions, and they're generally religions that came from Europe. And set up communities in that area because of religious persecution in Europe. So you've got Lutheran, Mennonite, Amish, Brethren. I'm trying to think. I think there's something else I'm missing, but and then you've got a lot of German heritage there. So we saw our quilt turning, and then our friend Making and Musings, or Jen, was there, and she gave me a big stack of old magazines. And Jill and I were like, should we split them? And I was like, I'll take them home because I want to start scanning stuff. So I have some fun magazines to look at. And I mean, we're talking like the old stuff. These are like 1930s. I've got like 34, 37, 33, good stuff. And they're the, these little community magazines that kind of had a lot of ads in them. And sometimes had, quilt patterns and sewing patterns and things in them. So I have a big stack to look at. So I'll start going through these and, find the quilty stuff to look at. And, I want to also scan some stuff. So big thank you to Making and Musings. And you guys will benefit from that. So let's look at some of the little tchotchkes I picked up. And then I'm going to read. I feel like, I stopped halfway last week. I guess it was last Monday. I stopped mid-chapter. So I'm going to get back on that. Because we're getting there. I think we've finally passed the halfway point on Lady of Godey's. And boy, do we love Sarah Josepha Hale or what? If anybody says anything bad about Sarah Hale. So first of all, let me disrobe a double T so you can see this adorable little apron. I got this from a booth at an antique market. I think it's called Adamstown Antiques or Adams Antiques. I think it's Adamstown Antiques. Really big antique mall. Like the whole front of it is just cases and cases and cases of all like the little stuff, the silver stuff, the coins, all that junk, which I skip because too rich for my blood. But in the back, there is a seller who sells antique and vintage doll clothes, and other doll things and other miniature things. And I probably spent 45 minutes just in that one little booth going through all of the adorable little doll clothes. Look at this apron. So it's got the little, the little bib. It's got little ties. But is that not the cutest thing you have ever seen? And I love doll clothes, little doll dresses and stuff. And I had a really hard time because there was a couple little outfits and I was like, I don't have a doll that these fit. So they're really just kind of cute to like just hang them up and display them. And I thought the apron was probably the cheeriest one I saw. Looks like the doll clothes probably from like the 50s and 60s. I'm guessing this is probably the 50s, maybe mid-century. At the very latest, the 40s, but I don't even think it's that old. So this is not particularly expensive. Cats love to wear doll clothes. Not mine, girl. I don't think I can manage the flesh wounds of trying to put this on my cat. Although for you guys, I'll try and I'll get a picture before I die. But the clothes, these kind of clothes are typically very affordable. She also has stuff that's from the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s, that are quite a bit more. And, yeah, that stuff is very collectible. It's kind of a category I guess I didn't realize, I didn't know about. And these doll clothes, and we have a friend who collects these very old doll clothes, and sometimes they almost look like baby clothes, but they're not quite big enough for the right proportions to be for a baby. They're definitely for a doll. But gorgeous little gowns. And, I'm not talking about like the ruffly Madame Alexander type of clothes. These are things that kind of look like what people would have been wearing in the late 1800s. These sort of shift dresses and, petticoats and stuff. Very, very interesting. So, of course, we're talking $50, $75, $100 a dress. So those are dresses that I don't currently have in my collection because, again, a little too much for me. So, hey, Mod Art. Soft spot for doll beds. Yes. Oh, that is something else. I've been looking for a doll bed. Almost had one on eBay recently for like a very decent price, like $15, and then not terribly expensive. Hey, Making Amusings, I was just saying that the gang will be benefiting from your generosity because I brought those magazines home and I'm going to start scanning them and sharing them. So, yay, Jen, thank you. And yes, anything miniature is the best. But anyway, I ended up losing this little doll bed on eBay, so I was bummed about that. But I really want one like with the turned posts and stuff, and I did see one at this antique store, and I kind of hemmed and hawed about it. It was not terribly expensive. I want to say it was like $30, but it was not in good shape, and I was kind of like, I don't want to have to like rehab a little bed. I want to just be able to get one and make a quilt for it, or mini quilts for it. So I'm still on the lookout. Kind of like there's lots of good things on eBay and in auctions and stuff, but typically you may be able to obtain them for a decent price, but the shipping will kill you. And, you cannot blame a seller for that because we're talking about something that's very unwieldy. The doll bed might be, depending on the size of doll it's for, could be, and if it's a canopy, like forget about it. So, ooh, Ellicott City. I think I know which place. I bet you anything. It's probably a place I'm thinking about. Thank you, Jen. I will check that out. Yeah, so, goals, doll bed, so that I can make little pillowcases and little things for them. Yeah. Jenny Lynn, actually Jenny Lynn's is an interesting one. She, they made a lot of dolls of her, and I actually have a couple boxes of the Jenny Lynn head and hands that you make the body for her. what was she? The Swedish Nightingale, I think is what they called her. She was an opera singer. So, well, let me show you what else I got besides this little apron. So first thing, this. Little Traveler's Sewing Kit. And the reason I got this one, the date on this one I think is 1957. I have a slightly older one. And what I, open this one, it's not in as great condition as the other one I have. But it's really interesting to look at, what is contained in these and how they changed over the years. And how they didn't change. So, kind of show you the inside of it. Ah! Got stuff falling out here. But, little things like, if you can see very well, this little card with needles on it. This is ridiculous. Look at this. That's the thimble. The thimble in my other kit is bigger. The thimble in my other kit is more like a tiny adult thimble. This looks like the cap off of something, but this is surely the thimble. This one came with some little hangers. They look like little Barbie hangers. And then there's some stuff in here with the doll that I think these are not the doll clothes that are meant to be made with this. Our little doll friend she's not in super shape. Her hair is quite a mess. Her little outfit is cute, and then she's got this little jacket that goes with it. But again, I don't think that these clothes were made using any of the patterns in the sewing kit. But what is the same about this kit and the older one I have are these dresses. This is what they send you in this kit. It's a little dress shape that has been cut out, and it's intended for you as the sewing child to stitch around the edge. And you can see the fabric looks like it's like mill scraps. This one, somebody sewed half of it, but you can see this is cut from something that was sold as a kit, I'm sure, a cross stitch type kit. And then you look at all of these other fabrics, and they are so strange and disparate. Like this one has this almost, I don't know, it's like a Greek key or like a Greek key kind of pattern. And then I'm not sure what it is on this, if this is some type of novelty fabric, but doesn't necessarily seem like it's meant for children's things. This is kind of more what I would expect as doll clothes. And there's piles of them in here, and there are piles of them in my other kit. So, it's I'm certain made by the same company. I just, having just gotten home, I haven't had a chance to pull out my other kit and look at it. So next stream, or a future stream, I will pull them both out so you can see. This doll is plastic. So the other doll in my other kit is composition, which is what tells me it's older, because plastic would have been, 50s, 60s and on, whereas composition dolls were a bit older. Here's her shiny nightgown, I guess. Exact same dress, though. And then there's patterns, there's the pattern sheet. So I was pretty excited with this one that, a lot of the stuff was still in here, even though it's not in great condition. And then I'll take some of this stuff out of here so you can see. This is how it was originally all in there. This is threads would have been there. And then the two little hangers were clipped in there. And then the little thimble sat on a tab there. And then there were scissors. My older kit actually still has the scissors too. So anyway, I thought that was a fun find. It's the kind of thing, I'm sure, unless you're a collector of this kind of stuff, It's the sort of thing that I think a lot of people would have passed this up because it's kind of a mess. But I thought it was fun. And I'm looking forward to, I'll take some pictures and compare my two different versions. All right, little doll lady, get in there. Okay. Look at the little handle. I mean, it's like a little suitcase, a little cardboard suitcase. Okay. Now, next, one of the shops, now let's talk antique shops. I would say there's 3 different kinds of antique shops. Antique, there's your antique mall, which I tend to think of the antique mall as like the sort of mid-range. You're going to see things that are pricey. You're going to see things that are pure crap. And you see a lot of stuff in between. We'll see booths that have just beautiful things, precious metals and, pristine objects from millennia ago. And then you will see booths that, some real scratch and dent stuff. You'll see booths that have like gross thrift store junk from the 80s, which now it's not gross junk anymore. People want it because it's the 80s. So those are kind of my favorite places to go because, you have a variety of things to look at. And at the very least, the window shopping is wonderful. Now, on the very low end, you have the thrift store type of antique shop, which is, estate sale clear outs. And, it's like literally like a scotch above Goodwill. And, they tend to be disappointing. Every now and then you'll run into like, some wonderful thing. But a lot of times it's sifting through stuff that you're just not interested in. And then up there above the antique malls, you have the antique store where you can't afford anything in there. You walk in and you're like, oh, this is a cute trinket. Oh my God, it's $800. It's just sitting out on a shelf. No big deal. We did go to one, it was probably a little bit like that. They had a lot of primitive furniture. I saw a few kind of cute things. Actually, it's the place where I got the little sewing kit, but most of it was more high-end, expensive things. Again, these places are a lot of fun to sort of window shop. And also they can tell you a little bit. You can look at things, and I would say never trust the dealers. And I'm sorry to any dealers out there. But a lot of times dealers are not particularly well versed in some of the things they have to offer. Now they might be like a complete expert in one thing that they have, but then they'll have other stuff that they make it up. Or they go by what they think is true, particularly with textiles. I've now at this point learned enough. I can look at a booth and look at the tags that people put on their quilts and their textiles and be like, no, you're wrong. That's not what that is. And it's certainly not worth the price you've put on it, is what it is. But you can't always really trust necessarily the description a dealer will give because their goal is to get you to buy the thing. And they're often passing along information that may have come with the object from its original owner or whoever they bought it from, whatever. But still, you can look at things and you can determine, little clues about, like household objects and furniture, about the time periods. And, these are items you probably don't have in your house. So you could go to an antique store and study them and start to make some, generalizations about life in whatever period it is that you're looking at. So I like to go to all range of those antique stores because you never know what you're going to find. You never know what you're going to learn. And at the very least, sometimes you see some just bizarre things that are just fun to look at. So one of my favorite places there is a place called Heritage. They have a great sense of humor because their mascot is Harold the Groundhog. And he is a stuffed groundhog about yay big. And they had him dressed as a ghost. He had a little sheet over him with eye holes. He also has a nephew who's a smaller groundhog. And they sit right in the front when you walk in the store. And then, there's all varieties of vendors there. Right in the very front is this one vendor. It's mostly glassware. And it's like I got a huge bag of salt cellars there for like $8. Well, this time I walked right into that booth and I look and I see on the floor a doll. let me show her to you. Now, she's not particularly old. I would put her in the vintage category. But she's pretty well made. I think the only thing about her that is probably kind of ick is her hair, because I don't know what it's made of. It's some kind of synthetic-y kind of, like, I don't know, it feels like rayon, like a rayon, but it's like a pearl cotton is what it looks like, but it's rayon. I don't like it. But the rest of her is pretty good. This is what her costume looks like. I wasn't sure what to make of her. Let me pull off her little shawl. But you can look and see all of this little hand needlework on her costume. You know, that's all little cross stitches and little embroidery, and it's really, really very perfect. I mean, look at this little, there's little hand stitches in there. And then she's got, her skirt, and then under her skirt, she's got a petticoat, an adorable petticoat. Look at that. Adorable little petticoat. And then her little top, all of these gorgeous little stitches. She's got 2 little tiny purses. The other one go under her arm. And then she's got jewelry, beaded jewelry. She's jointed together kind of loosely. Yes, right, Mod Art? I love her. She's made like an old-fashioned doll. And for whatever reason, she's tied together with elastic. Like, that needs to be replaced. But otherwise, she's in really good condition. And I researched her when I got back to the house. And the closest I could find, I could not find one that looked exactly like her, but I found one that was really, really close. Had a very similar outfit. The embroidery was different. She is my first guess, just based on these little animals, was like, maybe she's Peruvian. Her sandals. Look at this. These are actual bicycle tires that have been cut, and then little leather laces. And then, of course, the kind of creepy part is they poked a hole in her foot to make it look like a thong sandal. But yes, her itty bitty little purses or little bags. She's wonderful. So I'm thinking, well, maybe she's Peruvian, Bolivian. I don't know. I didn't think Bolivian, because I think their folk costumes are different. But I really don't know a whole lot about South American stuff. Although, I just know enough to recognize she's definitely South American. So I did a little bit of research, and what I discovered is she's a huichol doll. And a huichol is a cultural, I don't know, what's the word to use? Like the huichol. It's sort of the folk, peasant, kind of native people of a part of Mexico. So she's Mexican. She's not really South American. Or, well, Mexico, I guess. Is Mexico South America? Mexico's North America. I'm terrible at geography, you guys. Guess how much I paid for her. Guess, guys, guess. Remember, I have a very strict budget. You're going to lose your mind when you find out how much I pay for this doll. I looked twice. I checked with the antique mall. Is this the right price? Forget the doll. The little outfit. Oh, Mod Art. No. I paid $5 for this doll. $5. I don't think this doll in Mexico probably 50 years ago cost $5. So I don't know. Yeah, I know. I don't know what the deal is with this booth, why they would be selling this beautiful little doll for $5. But I'm like, hello, I got a bargain. I'm going to kind of fix her hair a little bit because it's been tied up with a rubber band. But, I mean, her little costume alone, I would have paid more for that, just because, as doll clothes. So yeah, $5, $10 Canadian. Yeah. I was just blown away. Once in a lifetime do you find fabulous. And yes, she is absolutely beautiful. Like, I mean, lovely handmade. I think her, you know, her body was definitely made, you know, sewn on a sewing machine, but all of this is handmade. So sometimes you can run into something very interesting in a antique store. And then other times you can be robbed blind because you don't know what you're looking at and you think it's a bargain and it's not. All right, so just a couple more things because, like I said, budget. Okay, so, also at the place where I got the doll clothes, and she's called Plum Pudding is the name of the booth, I found this interesting book. And this goes back to my, well, at first I was looking at it, I was like, ooh, this looks very textile, because it's called the Distaff book, the Distaff sketchbook. And at first I thought, ooh, like weaving, maybe spinning, like distaff is the thing that you put your fiber on when you're spinning. That's the distaff. This. It's like a pointy stick, and it goes on. I think there's separate distaffs that you could just kind of have on your person if you're walking around spinning. But if you're using a spinning wheel, the distaff has like a location on the spinning wheel that it goes. So again, I'm thinking textiles. But then as I flip it through it, I realized it's actually costume, which goes back to my personal history, loving costume. So this was written by a man named Robert L. Klinger. And it is a collection of notes and sketches on women's dress in America, 1774 to 1783. It is very good. Now, there are better books. If you are into costume and want to learn, Janet Arnold's books are very good if you're interested in like this kind of time period, the colonial era and like on into the early 1800s. Janet Arnold was, she worked with Williamsburg, Colonial Williamsburg. There's some folks in Europe. There's a dress academy, that I think it's the Academy of Historical Dress. They're kind of taking Janet Arnold's, you know, her legacy and they're adding books to it. It's all very interesting, very precise and meticulous. It's good stuff. This does not rise to the level of Janet Arnold, but this is still very good. But let me tell you, if you think this picture's kind of a funky looking lady, look at some of the ladies in this book. Some of them are straight terrifying. Let me find one. That is just awful. This goes back to, I think I've said it a few times, faces are hard. I think this guy did such a wonderful job with the costume, with the clothing. He did some really wonderful, sketches of what these garments looked like and how the pieces go together. And then he decided to draw the faces wearing these garments. This one's not too bad, although, ooh, she's not a pretty lady. Look at this lady. Oh gosh, Mr. Klinger, why didn't you not stick to maybe drawing the ladies? Instead of drawing ladies, perhaps draw them on mannequins. There's one in particular here that is just terrifying. She's in like a skating costume. Oh yeah, here she is. She is in such an unnatural pose. Yes, they have 5 o'clock shadows. Yes, they do. So nice try. Nice job. He was looking in the mirror, perhaps. Now look at these pages. No heads. These pages are perfect. These are, the clothing is very well drafted, and then the pattern piece is very well drafted, but not the faces. This is a great sketch of shoes and shoe buckles. Wonderful. Anyway, I just had to have it, so that was a nice little purchase. $10. Remember, budget. Okay. And then, so I collect dish towels. You know what kind I'm talking about. Ye old calendar dish towel. What if he was the model for the illustrations? I think he was. I mean, you know what? You draw what you know. And shows how often he looked at women's faces versus their bodies. Yes, ma'am. Yes. So this is a 1973 dish towel. And I particularly look for the ones that are my birth year. So I recently used one of my 1973 dish towels in a project. And so I was like, well, I saw this one. I had to re-up my collection. So that was one tiny purchase in cash, $3. And by the way, those are wonderful collector's items. They're getting harder and harder to find. I think people are using them to make garments with now. There's a woman on, I follow her on Instagram, and she makes like really cute stuff with things like those dish towels and other kinds of like household linens, but like little halter tops and cute things. Now this is a fun thing. So it's a child's toy. And I actually have a big one. This one, they're little tiles. But basically you can make quilt blocks with it. And the little tiles all come out. And these were pretty popular toys, I think. You know, probably like turn of the century through the 50s, I think. I don't think this one has a date on it. Made in Germany, though. And, you know, there's all these different patterns that you can make. So I thought that was really fun. Like I said, I have a big one that was a gift from the owner of it that had played with it as a child. And I was like, this would make a nice little companion for it, because these are, you know, guys know I collect like little household type of children's toys and things. So I thought that one was very fun. And just to freak Jill out, I had to buy a bisque baby doll that only has one leg. And she didn't quite understand this, but I will say I do collect doll parts because I've made art out of them. But you can see the top part of the baby is in just perfect condition. It's just missing a leg. We got one leg, but you know, I can find another leg for this little person. And then my final purchases are here in this tiny little bag. So I found a Sunbonnet Sue postcard. I have found these before, and you know, it's fun to go, you know, you find the booths in these antique malls where it's their ephemera dealers. So they'll have things like a lot of old ads. And, oh, speaking of which, there's one other thing I have in here that I forgot about. This. This is the other thing. They'll have ad pages out of old magazines and things, and they'll sell them individually for people that collect, like, you know, Texaco ads or Coca-Cola ads or whatever. This happens to be a Singer ad. And it's a Singer ad from 1949. And so it's got a featherweight. And what's really funny is it says, world's most popular machine weighs a mere 11 pounds without the red bow. Yeah, because, you know, the red bow adds another 5. It does, let's see, it does the work of a full-size model, sews forward and backward, and comes in a luggage-style case. So I thought that was really fun. Machines start, so the portable machines are starting at $89.50, and cabinet models at $147.50. So that's 1949. So that was fun thing to have. So anyway, these ephemera dealers, it's fun to look through those because you can sometimes find things. Typically, the things they have are pretty affordable. Sometimes you can find old exhibition catalogs. You can find fun postcards and advertising pieces. So anyway, my point about this is I have found, there's a whole series of these postcards. I'd found them before, but I was kind of like, I don't want to pay $5 for a postcard. This one was $1. So I was like, yes, I can spring for $1. So that. And then I typically don't buy needle books because you can always find them in old sewing kits. I had to get this one. It's a Virginia Slims needle book. You know, you gotta appeal to women of all types. So here's the needle book for the smokers. And this says, it used to be that men would needle women who smoked in public, but you've come a long way, baby. And here on the back, make sure you try new Virginia Slims. Corrupting the youth. Indeed. And so then there's the needles. And there must have been something else here. I don't know if it was more needles. It might have been another little chunk of needles there. But I had to. I was like, you know, this is so horrible and tacky. Even the cigarette company's got in on it. Okay. And my last item is a hot Victorian. Again, going through one of the ephemera dealers, they had a ton of photos. And, you know, it's funny. It used to be, I feel like I'd go through antique stores and photos were really big. You know, the cabinet cards and sometimes the stereoscopes. You know, they would be like $10 a cabinet card, things like that. Well, apparently people aren't going for those pictures anymore. I guess either people aren't decorating with them or artists that used to buy them up to alter them or put them in collages and stuff or not buying them. I don't know. But super cheap. Like a whole bunch of pictures, $1 each, $2, $3 each. So this is a tin type and you can see how teeny it is. Gotta get real close so you can see him. I don't know who he is. I don't know what his name is, but he's a hot Victorian. There is an Instagram page, Instagram account called Hot Victorians. So now I have my own. And, you know, why is it so tiny? Well, it's a tin type. They were not very big, but I think this is the right size for a locket. So my guess is this was made, you know, and it's got this really pretty embossed wreath around the picture cutout, the hole for the picture. So my guess is this was something that you'd give your sweetheart, and either she didn't hold on to this or she didn't, you know, take it out and put it in a locket. I don't know. It ended up in an antique store. So it's my hot Victorian. Let's think of a name for him. Anybody has a good name for my hot Victorian? Let me know. And that was my shopping trip. So I was proud of myself. The most expensive thing that I purchased was the little sewing kit, and it cost me $30. So you don't have to necessarily, you know, Victor. Hey, Kate. Do we think he's a Victor? Actually, you know what? Let me leave him out so we can keep looking at him as we need to. Google the image and find some info. I mean, I could try. Every now and then, you know, you sometimes the Google lens will come up with, you know, some good hits. He sort of looks, I mean, he's a good-looking man, but he sort of looks generic in my opinion. I don't know. We'll see. So we've got Victor. Ancestry could be. So we've got a Victor. We'll see what else are we in contention for the name. I could name him Charles Maurice Unger, because that is the gentleman who was writing Marjorie Fitch. Bed under the box, Marjorie Fitch. So that was a day of antique shopping, and whew, takes a lot out of you, you know. And it, you know, it's so funny. I think all three of us. So Anne was with us, and of course Jill, and we all would like go into one area and be looking at things and sneezing and sniffling and our noses running. 'Tis the season, I guess. It's just, you know, the leaves are coming off the trees. And, ooh, Everett. So we've got Victor, we've got Everett. Those are both good. He could be Victor Everett. He could be Everett Victor. Those are both good first and last names. But yeah, those places are, I feel like antique stores, I'm very allergic to them because of, the mold, the mildew, the dust. And then this time of year, the leaves are coming down and you get the good old leaf mold. So got all the allergies, the fall time allergies. Yes, Charles. Yeah. So, Marjorie Fish's suitor, Charles Maurice Unger. What a name. And he would sign his name Chas, Chas, which, back then people did abbreviate their names. So Chas would be just an abbreviation for Charles, not necessarily meant to be called Chas. Robert would be ROBT. James was Jazz, JAS. So, all right, you guys, let's read some Lady of Godey's. I'm really been missing her. Where we stopped, we were talking about the Union, and we're kind of getting into some Civil War type stuff. So, as a reminder, we are reading The Lady of Godey's, Sarah Josepha Hale, written by our dear friend Ruth Finley. She was a journalist. She also wrote a quilt book. She was not a quilter. I'll leave it at that. We've read her before. So where we were at here, and we were in this very long chapter called The Union Forever. And so, it was kind of going through her political leanings. She was a Northern Democrat, was kind of her political leanings. She didn't really get too into the politics necessarily in the book because she didn't want to alienate people. But, she was definitely a George Washington freak. She loved George Washington. She had some ideas. And I think she was so I know I asked a while back, like, what do you think it would be like if Sarah Hale just showed up in 2024? Like, what would she, like, how would her mind be blown? I think, of course, there are many things that would absolutely blow the mind of a person living in, the mid 1800s. But I do think from the perspective of sort of dealing with societal concerns, so politics and social needs and community stuff, I think Sarah Hale would hold her own even today. I think that her mindset was very progressive. She was all about, uplifting women. And I mean, in a time when she was born almost 100 years before women had the right to vote. And she died, I'm trying to remember what her death date was. I want to say it was the 1870s, 1880s. Yeah. She, again, she died at least 40 years before women had the right to vote. But she was all about women's education. Kindergarten, making sure children had a good start. Charity things for wives of sailors. And I mean, just all kinds of things like, making sure that women were not second-class citizens, essentially. So I have a lot of respect for her. And, even though, of course, she was a product of her times, she was also really, really, really forward-thinking. So where we left off, I'm gonna repeat the last paragraph that we read. So again, this is The Lady of Godey's, Sarah Josepha Hale by Ruth Finley, and we are in chapter 11. I hate having to translate Roman numerals. So, chapter 11, The Union Forever. And we're picking up about halfway through. So, the domestic happiness of an amiable couple is often mentioned by Mr. Chapman, and he declares that, in his opinion, the best method of promoting harmony between the different sections of our union would be to promote intermarriage among the inhabitants. There is, he remarks, more affinity between the youths and the maidens of the North and South than between cotton growers and cotton manufacturers. So, I mean, again, in the U.S., this time period, slavery was still in full swing. You've got cotton being grown in the South, tended, and, the whole process by enslaved people. And you've got cotton manufacturing up in the North, the mills in Lowell, Massachusetts, and so on and so forth. So you've kind of got this definitely an economic situation going on. You also have abolition, and the Civil War was a tricky thing. So we'll see what Sarah's belief about it was. And, again, essentially, if you're not from the U.S., you might not know that, the Civil War ended, with the South surrendering and the Emancipation Proclamation being signed into law, and which abolished slavery. That was President Lincoln who was responsible for that. And yeah, then we, 1860. Ooh. You guys, I'm terrible with my dates. The Civil War was only a few years long, but it was 1860s. So, and the lady's book was, by no means a little magazine at that point. It was, the lady's book was very, very well known and very well distributed during this period. Here was the first hint of Sarah Hale's later contention that not slavery, but economics was the real issue between the states. The early trend of New England towards industrialism, fostered by the enormous amount of natural water power to be had for the harnessing of tumbling mountain streams, caused, she claimed, the original suggestion of a breach. Many years before abolition became more than a theme for unpopular minority agitation, Mrs. Hale was so apprehensive over the increasing economic rivalry, as well as the political jealousy. Thank you, Druid. 1861 to 1865. I should have known that. I was thinking it was like, is it 1862? So she was so apprehensive over economic rivalry and political jealousy between the two sections. I like how she's calling it the sections, the North and the South. That an amazingly large portion of her writings were devoted to an effort to enlist agrarianism and industrialism in a common progress. It is evident that she felt the South lacked perception of the limitations nature had placed on New England's agriculture. For beginning with Northwood, and remember, Northwood was like her first book, like her tour de force, which I think was reprinted many times, and it still not 100% clear like what the contents of Northwood were, but she touches upon slavery. I think it's really like a very like a social commentary, essentially, is what Northwood is. So for beginning with Northwood, she repeatedly set up the climactic contrast between the lushly rich soil and long growing seasons of the southern states and the rock-ribbed icy barrenness of the North. The hand of the Lord, she contended, had created the South for agriculture and the North for industry. When New England made use of its water power, it was doing only that which it was indicated as a means of self-preservation. Even the best of the soil was already deteriorating, according to Mrs. Hale, despite careful rotation of crops and constant fertilizing. Out of her own girlhood knowledge, gained from watching her father's futile struggle with seed sown on stony ground. Now, remember, she's from the Boston area, and she ended up coming down to Philadelphia to be the editor of Ladies' Godey's magazine, or the book. So seeds sown on stony ground in East Mountain fields, she pictured vividly the infinite labor required to produce from poor soil even a meager yield. Not for many more generations, she warned in 1830, could New England be supported by its farms alone. But when the northern cotton manufacturers demanded protection in the form of a tariff on imported goods, especially those of England, and the southern cotton growers objected on the ground that this would injure their markets, the largest of which was still England. So England because of all of their colonial shenanigans. You know, they could get cotton in India or they could get cotton from us. And they liked getting cotton from us because it was quicker to cross the Atlantic than to deal with cotton from other warmer climates. Mrs. Hale was in favor of free trade. Thus far, she sympathized with the South, all the while, however, staunchly against secession. Ingenious were the lengths she went to in the face of Mr. Godey's mandate of no politics to aid in averting severance of the Union. In the mid-50s, 1850s, the heroic Women of the Revolution series, which already had run through many issues of the lady's book, took the form of straight interviews. Elderly women, North and South, whose memories went back to Revolutionary days, were invited to state their opinions on public questions. If the largest space was given to Southern women, especially South Carolinians, it was with the deliberate intent of spreading non-secession propaganda from the South itself. Interesting. So she's doing a little bit of political machination, even though Mr. Godey did not want politics in his magazine. And to interview women and have women's voices be heard, that is something that's like kind of unheard of. I mean, there was only a handful of like famous women, you know, writers and thinkers at this time. A typical interview was that of Mrs. Susanna Smart of South Carolina, the first state finally to secede. It appeared in the book for March 1856 under the title of A Carolina Woman of the Revolution. Following a carefully detailed sketch of this lady's northern ancestry, she was quoted as stressing the union of the North and South during the Revolution and saying that an attack on the liberties of Massachusetts was viewed as an attack on Carolina. The article went on to state that Mrs. Smart talked with interest of the politics of our day and read the newspapers even at the age of 90. She confided to Mr. Stinson, the interviewer, that one of her relatives had been telling her of a political meeting to be held in York District at which was to be discussed the secession of South Carolina from the Union. I don't know what York District is. I mean, she's living in Philadelphia, and York is in Pennsylvania, but also there's probably a York or York County in lots of states, so I don't know. York District. She intimated that she had heard more than once of this new device, but also had been informed that many of the good, gifted, and great of South Carolina were not in favor of secession. In September, and here's the thing, based on I kind of have limited knowledge about the Civil War because I grew up in a place where the Civil War was a big deal. Fredericksburg, Virginia, smack dab in the middle, well, not quite the middle, sort of the northern middle of Virginia. The South will always rise again, according to people in that area. And, a lot of the things that I've read of that time period is people, your average citizen, was not necessarily in favor of anything that was happening. Certainly the big plantation owners wanted to keep their enslaved people because they were, free work, a free workforce. And there also were enslaved people in the North. So slavery was kind of a real sticky situation as it pertains to the Civil War and secession. And the abolition of slavery was the most important thing to come out of the Civil War. But definitely all of this economic stuff, I think, is really a huge piece of the puzzle, whatever. And most citizens didn't want to be at war. They didn't want to be seceding. I mean, and I mean, she's saying it right here. These elderly people who were like, we all came together for the revolution. And, less than 100 years later, we're fighting each other. That's no good, right? In September of the same year, another elderly Carolinian, one Mary Gray, was allowed to say through Godey's that in post-revolutionary days, though the people of the several states knew their rights and dared to maintain them, they made no false issue. Only one interpretation can be put upon Godey's printing so harsh an implication. Its editor believed, though she herself had been among the first to look forward to a time when only free men, black or white, should tread the soil over which the eagle and the stars keep guard. That slavery as an agitated cause for war was a false issue, a blind, as it were, to a selfish aggression on the part of the North, and equally a cloak under which the South sought to cover the defense of its political supremacy. I mean, I don't know enough to say one way or the other because I have not studied really this topic much, but wow, don't some of these things sound a little bit familiar for today? Ugh. You know, when we have patriotism, Zionism, people being very divided. Yeah. We obviously have, all of us have far, far, far more rights now, except reproductive rights. Okay, I'll stop off my soapbox. But yeah, I mean, this political division that we're talking about here is I mean, it just seems so familiar to me, even though it's not really the same thing. Blind as it worse, the selfish aggression. So for it must be remembered that for many decades the South had enjoyed predominance of power, that it favored an aristocratic rather than popular democracy. Pay to play politics, perhaps, and that its quarrel was based not only on the retention of slavery, but on perpetuation of its national leadership. Yeah, okay. Defeat of that leadership meant more than the loss of slaves. It meant, the South feared, Yankee factories subsidized at the expense of the agrarian Southland's world markets, Northern middle-class domination over Southern gentlemen. Do we not hear a little bit about that? It's not North and South anymore necessarily, although sometimes it is. It is class division. Okay, we've got a lot of class division in the United States. We've got, you know, the haves, the 1%, and then we've got the rest of us. It is always an easy thing in the heat of sentiment, Sarah Hill argued before the outbreak of the Civil War, to lose sight of cold facts. Face the facts, she insisted, and bloodshed could be avoided. And the big fact was, in Mrs. Hale's opinion, that Northerner and Southerner were brothers, born of the same strain, sharing a common heritage. Yeah, because a lot of the people that came from England in the 1700s migrated south, and then some of them didn't. So yeah, the people that had been around for a while, kicking indigenous people off their lands, were related. And this imaginary line in the sand south of Pennsylvania really kind of messed things up, even though it's ridiculous. As sentiment on both sides of the Mason and Dixon line waxed hotter and hotter, harder and harder, she worked to displace emotion with understanding, division with concord. Month after month, all through 57, 58, 59, and into 60, the book was filled with articles praising the colonial and federal loyalty of the South, with fiction picturing current Southern life, and with steel engravings of patriotic subjects. Even children were drawn into the editor's campaign for civil peace. In May 1957, she had begun an American history series designed especially for juvenile readers. Begin early with your little ones, American mothers, and teach them how great is the empire they are to rule. Do not confine their young hearts to the boundaries of any single state. Let their patriot love go out wide as the sweep of our eagle's wings. The boundaries of any state. I don't want to get into politics, guys. I'm sorry. I will zip it there. Okay. But in September 1860, the indefatigable, I can never say that word, the lady editor seems to have given up hope. In a long review that almost hysterically praised Florence Nightingale's new book on practical nursing, she urged all women to buy it, pleaded with them to study it, and concluded by saying, "Learn what is needed now." She saw it coming, and she said, "Y'all are going to be working in some hospitals, ladies." She knew it was coming. And the irony of that injunction was that only a few months before Mrs. Hale had brought to a successful conclusion, through cooperation given by North and South alike, the campaign that was the very essence of her propaganda for the Union. Always and in every conceivable fashion, the sacred name of Washington, our common hero, had been kept before her readers. Thus, in 1849, 2 interiors of Mount Vernon were published, the Great Entrance Hall and the Great Hall, with all the sculptures and ornaments. Well, gee, that's a good way to really get invested in patriotism. I can't say that today people would be especially moved by the grandeur, say, of the White House or whatever. These are still of exceeding interest, the sketches having been made, according to the magazine, from original designs for the furnishings drawn by General Washington himself. Unhappily, the engraver introduced several human figures, but even this enlivening touch, as the armchair, remember that's Mr. Godey, called that superfluous manifestation of our artist's skill, cannot destroy the value of sketches made from documents undoubtedly lent by members of the Washington family who still occupied the mansion. Following the publication of these sketches, there appeared some 3 months later a detailed and apparently accurate description of Mount Vernon, as it then was, situated at a point difficult and out of the way to get to, and fast falling into ruin. That's pretty wild. You know, it's, 1849, 1850. Now, Mount Vernon today is a place that you can go and see completely restored as it was in, 1776, I guess. I can't remember when Washington had Mount Vernon when he built it. The author, one Robert Criswell Jr., speaks of visitors being denied admittance to the house by the family in possession, that of John Augustine Washington, the last private owner. It is probable that reporter Criswell was so denied. At least he confined his description to the exterior. He was greatly disturbed by the external appearance of the estate, as almost everything about it seems dilapidated and decaying, overgrown with briars, a scene of wreck and waste. Enough of the old lodge, located about a mile from the house, was still standing to shelter an ancient woman, one of the Washington emancipated slaves, who in her young womanhood had been a trusted house servant to Lady Washington. She claimed, Mr. Criswell wrote, to have been in the room with her mistress when General Washington died, but 50 years before. She tells many things about him, the author continued casually, hurrying on to relate that while poking about with his cane in the rubbish of the old vault, Washington's body and that of his wife had been transferred in 1837 to the new vault, where they still lie. He found an invaluable relic, being a small corner of the outside case of the original coffin. Oh, Lord. Okay, so this reporter's poking around Mount Vernon with his cane, and he finds part of Washington's original coffin. A piece of the pall still attached to it by 2 brass nails. But such details, I mean, can you imagine reading about this in a magazine today? You know, you pick up Good Housekeeping, and some article writer or reporter's talking about, stop by Mount Vernon the other day to see what was going on. I was poking around in the weeds, and I found part of a coffin. Oh my gosh. But such details were only incidental to the main theme of his story, which was as follows. Congress has been petitioned again and again to purchase Mount Vernon, but as yet to no effect. The present owners are willing to dispose of 150 acres, excuse me, including the buildings, tombs, and immediate grounds for about $100,000. $100,000? Wow. There was a lot of property associated with Mount Vernon, but it seems like a lot of money at that time period. There is something so national about the estate that it should unquestionably become public property. It is said that the present owners are unwilling to let it pass out of their possession to any individual or company, and unless Congress interferes, the time will soon come when we shall be pointed at as profaners for allowing so sacred a spot to be involved in utter ruin. If Congress is unwilling to appropriate the necessary funds from the public treasury, let it appoint suitable agents, and the amount can be raised by private subscription in 1 month. However, it was not raised in 1 month, and when Mount Vernon finally was sold, the price paid was exactly double that quoted by Mr. Criswell, so $200,000. There are evidences that Mrs. Hale at this time had the idea that Godey's might sponsor some movement to preserve Mount Vernon. Interesting. She was in correspondence with various persons about the estate and felt the utmost concern over its decay, which was proceeding so rapidly that between the time of Mr. Criswell's visit and the putting of his report into type, the lodge collapsed. The editor appended a note to that effect to the article. From letters, we learned that even the lodge is now gone, nothing remaining save the gatepost and a few crumbling walls. Editor of Lady's book. I knew that Mount Vernon had some history like that. It had basically been brought back from ruin. So it says Mount Vernon as the artist saw it in the early 40s from the Christian Family Annual. So this isn't actually even from Godey's. But this is what Mount Vernon looked like according to the artist at that time. And I've been there a few times, but I honestly can't say that I really... I don't think it all looks like this anymore. Modern Northern Virginia is still, has encroached around in here. But this is interesting. So think about all of this. Civil War is impending and happening. She's trying to get people rallied around the idea of anti-secession without actually saying it. And she's trying to use Washington and the legacy of George Washington to rally people patriotically, I guess. It's an interesting attempt at that. Why Mrs. Hale did not immediately forge ahead for Mount Vernon, as she had for the Bunker Hill Monument, can only be surmised. Oh yeah, I forgot about the Bunker Hill Monument. If you guys remember that one, they were having the worst time, like the men who were in charge of erecting the Bunker Hill Monument, they were having the worst time getting it finished because they could not get the funds together. Sarah Hale stepped in, basically held a bake sale and got it all taken care of. Not really a bake sale, but she got involved and quickly got the money together to finish the Bunker Hill Monument. Perhaps she considered the risk too great for her magazine to assume unaided. Here was involved a bond between the states, the memory of the founder, Washington. Failure of any movement in behalf of Mount Vernon might weaken that bond. And so nothing tangible was done, not until 1853, when the Southern matron, otherwise Miss Anne Pamela Cunningham, the inspired founder and first regent of the Mount Vernon Ladies Association of the Union, began her long and arduous labors to save this most beautiful of all shrines to the nation. So this is interesting. So this is the Mount Vernon Ladies Association of the Union. This is 7 years before the Civil War begins, and it's not quite yet saying. Yeah, I mean, she's called a Southern matron, so I'm guessing she's a Virginian. I knew that there was a ladies' association that was in charge of, I guess, trying to save Mount Vernon, but I don't know this name, Anne Pamela Cunningham. The story has been written and rewritten, and the patriotism of the Southern matron extolled. The credit is hers, and the glory as it should be. For 2 years, she worked almost alone, gathering about her but a small band of women who, unincorporated, hardly had the right to ask for funds. And then, in August 1855, Sarah Hale announced in Godey's Lady's book that the periodical, together with the Southern Literacy Messenger, had been chosen as the two official organs, North and South, to represent nationally the Mount Vernon Ladies Association. She said, "A novel plan has been formed for securing to the people of America the home and grave of the father of our country. Who that breathes the free air of our republic does not feel that where Washington lived and died is the holiest spot in all our land? People certainly do not think that now. To make this spot the sacred inheritance of America's children to the end of time is the object now in view, and woman is the honored agent of the plan. Some 2 years ago, a lady of South Carolina... Oh, okay. So the Southern matron apparently is a South Carolinian. I'm guessing that's what she means, right? Some 2 years ago, a lady... Yeah, 1853 is when Anne Pamela Cunningham... Yeah, okay. So some 2 years ago, a lady of South Carolina suggested the idea that the women of America should raise the money and purchase such portion of the estate as Mount Vernon as includes the old mansion and the sacred tomb. Many of our friends doubtless have read the eloquent appeals of a Southern matron. These appeals have been successful in awakening a deep interest in the ladies of the South, and funds to a considerable amount have been collected. Now a systematic effort is to be made to enlist all generous and patriotic hearts. We want contributions from every section. We want the daughters of the North to come with rich gifts and join their sisters of the South as the brave patriots of both regions united in the glorious war of the Revolution. Washington's fame belongs to his whole country. His name is the holy cement of our Union. The editors of the Ladies' Book hope to interest every friend of theirs in this effort of national patriotism. Thenceforth, the story of Mount Vernon was told in Godey's, issue after issue. Contributions were asked for and the names of contributors recorded. $1 made the donor a member of the association. $200,000 was the purchase sum required. In October 1855, the Ladies' Book announced that particular efforts were being made in New Orleans, St. Louis, Cincinnati, Springfield, Massachusetts, Norfolk, and Petersburg, Virginia, Cape May, that's in New Jersey, and Philadelphia to augment the sum already raised, which was between $60,000 and $70,000. The following year, in an exultant 2-page editorial, the book told of the long-delayed passage of a bill in the Virginia State Legislature, January 18, 1856, incorporating the Mount Vernon Ladies Association. This was a great triumph for the women, affording their efforts a business basis as well as official sanction. The bill empowered the governor of this Commonwealth to obtain from John A. Washington a contract binding him to convey 200 acres of land out of said Mount Vernon place at any time within 4 years of the passage of this act. Enthusiasm ran high. The Ladies' Book proposed July 4th, 1856, as a sort of national tag day for the collection of funds. New York immediately took steps to organize a state committee. Washington Irving consenting to act as chairman. Washington Irving! Of course, he would be the writer who gave us The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Ichabod Crane, the Headless Horseman. How very Halloween. Edward Everett. Everett might be a good name for our hot Victorian. Everett Victor? Victor Everett? I don't know. So Edward Everett, with whom Mrs. Hale had so successfully worked for Bunker Hill, began delivering... Oh, that's right. Okay, this is the guy that she partnered with for Bunker Hill. Began delivering his famous lecture on Washington, the proceeds of which, over a period of 4 years, netted the fund its largest single contribution, $68,295, or more than 1/3 of the total purchase price. Mrs. Hale told about a rag fair. Okay, that's about as bake sale as you can get. That had been recently held in London, a novel idea she forthwith made popular in America in behalf of Mount Vernon. The rag fair that has come down to posterity as the well-known and constantly begged-for charity rummage sale. So, church sale, yard sale. I mean, this is what she's talking about. And so the record goes on until, in the book for March 1860, the great announcement is made. Mount Vernon now belongs to the American nation. Bought by the Ladies Association of the Union, the last payment has been made. There never was a time in the history of our republic when this love of our whole country was so imperatively demanded, nor when the sentiment of union and patriotism was more essential to our peace and happiness. We consider the complete success of the Mount Vernon Ladies Association of the Union a great moral triumph because it bears the true stamp of patriotism and is the happy harbinger of faith in the permanence of our national union. That was March in 1860. Less than a year later, things don't go well. But before the year was out, not the patriotic faith of all the many thousands South and North who, like Sarah Hale, had striven to create happy harbingers of peace could preserve the permanence of our national union. The rapidity with which events moved once South Carolina led the way by adopting an ordinance of secession on December 20th, 1860, points now to a political intrigue, sensed then only to be dismissed by most a mischievous gossip. Sarah Hale had crossed the sword of that intrigue with her pen. With spoken words, Abraham Lincoln, in his first inaugural address, sought to brush the sword aside. That there are persons in one section or another who seek to destroy the Union at all events, and are glad of any pretext to do it, I will neither affirm nor deny. If there be such, I need address no word to them. To those, however, who really love the Union, may I not speak. He spoke, but it was too late. The stage was already set, and the actors were waiting in the wings. On July 9th, 1861, Mississippi had seceded, to be followed in rapid succession by Florida on the 10th, Alabama on the 11th, Georgia on the 19th, Louisiana on the 26th, and Texas on February 1st. 3 days later, on February 4th, the seceded states had met in convention at Montgomery. That's ironic that they met in Montgomery, Alabama. On the 8th, they had and I'm wondering if Montgomery, Alabama was the location for so many of the civil rights work, not just because some horrible things had happened there, but I mean, symbolically, we have a seceded Southern Union meeting there. So there's some symbolism there that's very interesting. On the 8th, they had adopted a constitution for the provisional government of the Confederate States of America, electing Jefferson Davis president of the Confederacy on the 9th and inaugurating him on the 18th, 2 full weeks before Abraham Lincoln took oath of office as president of the United States in Washington. On March 6th, only 2 days after Lincoln's inauguration, the Confederate Congress, having on February 28th provided for raising of provisional forces, enacted a measure calling for an army of 100,000 volunteers to be sworn in for 12 months' service. In speech following speech, Lincoln, as president-elect, had said he would do all in his power to keep out of war, that he had no thought of arbitrarily freeing the slaves. I didn't know that Lincoln said that. In his address at Independence Hall on Washington's birthday, delivered on his way to his inauguration, he said explicitly, "Now, in my view of the present aspect of affairs, there is no need for bloodshed and war. There is no necessity for it. I am not in favor of such a course, and I may say in advance that there will be no bloodshed unless it be forced upon the government. The government will not use force unless force is used against it." He kept his word. Not until Fort Sumter had been actually fired upon, April 12th, and surrendered on the 13th, though many other federal forts previously had been taken over without force by Confederate state authorities, was the first call for Northern troops issued by the Commander-in-Chief. The North has this to remember with gratitude. As for the South, the people of the South had not willed the war. Rather, they were railroaded into it. The bitterness of division and the flush of loyalty alike now cooled. It is plain that a few fierily tempered leaders precipitated the conflict, even as is every war brought about by the ambition or over hasty few. Once in, there was no turning back, and the South fought as the North fought, like Americans, to the last ditch. Well, isn't that fun? We are a tenacious people. We will fight each other until we're all dead. And even though I don't know a whole lot about the Civil War, because I kind of pushed it aside growing up. I do know that the casualties of the Civil War are greater, the numbers are greater than American lives lost in other theaters of war, like combined, I think. We might be getting close now that we have been in other conflicts in modern times, but all of World War I, all of World War II, those losses, Vietnam, all together did not equal the number of lives lost in the American Civil War. So pretty awful a thing that nobody wanted to get into except for some people, agitators at the top, and, inciting this secession resulted in, brother fighting brother and so many people dying. So what I'm saying is not that the reasons for the Civil War didn't need to be addressed, because they did, this economic stuff and the abolition of slavery. But the question is, did it have to be through war? Men were in charge. That's all I'm saying. Men were in charge. I don't want to be the angry feminist, but Jill asked me last night, what would happen if just tomorrow, like, bloop, all the women left, women just disappeared? What would happen? I was like, well, men would basically fight each other until they were all gone. That's what would happen. So let's see. Fought like Americans to the last ditch. But the gigantic fraternal struggle between the states was not willed by the rank and file of the people, neither of the South nor of the country as a whole. Lincoln knew this, even as had that alert editor, Sarah Hale, and would gladly have committed the issue to popular decision. For had he not spoken to those who really loved the Union, had he not spoken the saying to those who really loved the Union, this country with its institutions belonging to the people who inhabit it. So this is Lincoln's words. Whenever they shall grow weary of the existing government, they can exercise their constitutional right of amending it, or their revolutionary right to dismember and overthrow it. Please don't let any president say that. We want to say, exercise your constitutional rights. We don't want this to happen again. Cake is saying that. Go vote. Don't fight with your fellow citizens. I cannot be ignorant of the fact that many worthy and patriotic citizens are desirous of having the national constitution amended. While I make no recommendations of amendments, I fully recognize the rightful authority of the people over the whole subject to be exercised in either of the modes prescribed in the instrument itself. And I should, under existing circumstances, favor rather than oppose a fair opportunity being offered the people to act upon it. I will venture to add that to me the convention mode seems preferable in that it allows amendment to originate with the people themselves instead of only permitting them to take or reject propositions originated by others, not especially chosen for the purpose, and which might not be precisely such as they would wish to either accept or refuse. Cake's keeping her lips zipped. Democracy. What would have been the answer if the question could have been put before the people in a general referendum, North and South? Would the Union have been dismembered? Would the South have seceded? Suppose the government had offered, as Sarah Hale and many other Union lovers believed it only fair it should, to compensate the Southern slaveholders for their property in the same manner that the federal government or a state government may condemn a citizen's land and take it from him for pay. Would the South have rejected this solution of the problem? Perhaps such was the obduracy of its leaders. But did not Lee tell Grant the day after the surrender at Appomattox Courthouse that the emancipation of the enslaved people would be no hindrance to the restoring of relations between the two sections of the country, as it probably would not be the desire of the majority of the Southern people to restore slavery, then even if the question were left open to them? And that's from Lincoln's first inaugural address, right? No. That's from Battles and Leaders of the Civil War. This apparently was some kind of book from 1884. Okay. Is it not true that among the better class of slaveholders, is there any good class of slaveholders, a better class of slaveholders? I don't think there's any good class of slaveholders. There was a growing sentiment already being acted upon by many toward emancipation. Might not this sentiment, strengthened by education and the fast developing mechanical age, have abolished slavery? Sarah Hale believed it would, and it was for this reason that she lacked sympathy with the Civil War. Though grandmother did not believe in slavery, says Colonel Charles Hunter, she deplored the Civil War. She agonized over it, for she was sure that education and time would have solved the problem, freed the slaves, and adjusted the economic controversy without sacrifice of life. I have heard her make this statement again and again. When asked why Godey's, during the 4 years of upheaval, printed next to nothing about the war, Colonel Hunter replied, remember, Colonel Hunter is her grandson, I do not know, but I suppose it was because of grandmother's feeling already explained. She did not believe in the necessity of war. In December 1862, number of the book, Mrs. Hale herself said the following: "We have come to the close of the 65th volume of the Lady's Book. It has been our aim steadily and consistently to keep the Lady's Book true to the highest principles of Christian duty. If the physical world were convulsed with storms and all of the elements of nature charged with destructive power, would it not be a blessed relief to find a lodge in the wilderness, an oasis in the desert, a quiet, cultured garden on which the burning lava had not even breathed? There must be somewhere in the heart of society the elements of faith, hope, and charity kept in active life, or peace and brotherhood in the teachings of the Savior will disappear from earth." Nevertheless, insofar as she was responsible for the neutrality of the magazine, she was wrong from the standpoint of her period. Whatever the origin of the quarrel between the states, slavery finally had become a moral issue. The Course of Godey's was a publishing mistake. Thereby, the book lost step with its times. Life and death, too, moved on during the 4 bitter years of bloodshed, the while the Lady's Book found a lodge in the wilderness. Engulfed in an emergency the like of which this continent had never before experienced, nor has experienced since, until the 21st century. Its readers looked in vain for the advice and encouragement they had been wont to receive so lavishly from its pages. Soon it was no longer the arbiter of the nation's parlors, no longer the last word of authority in every home. When the war ended, Mrs. Hale was 77 years old. For 12 more years, the book continued to be published by Lewis Godey and edited by Sarah Hale. But it never again quite caught up with the times. Slowly, inevitably, it slipped down the sunset side of the hill. Now, this is interesting. I would not have guessed. She kind of fell out of favor over her thoughts of not trying to stay out of politics. However, as one looks back through the 3/4 of a century that had passed, what proved a mistake then seems not so great an error now. For there is a growing belief in the common mind that all war is disproportionately costly. I don't know that they think this way now. An aspiration, even on the part of governments, for peace. Such peace as Mrs. Hale visioned in 1863 of her New Year editorial for the Lady's Book, a millennium not yet come, but more and more sought for, when the world may throw away the weapons of warfare and ensigns of military strife, so that influences of love and goodwill may have room to work for concord, prosperity, and joy. Wow. And so, if you remember, this book was written in 1931. So, Ruth Finley's coming from a perspective of, she's lived through World War I, but we have not gotten to World War II yet. So this is kind of an interesting thought process and viewpoint of, looking at Sarah Hale's beliefs and thoughts on the Civil War And the fact that we were in 1931, we were in a depression, a Great Depression, but we were not in the middle of bloodshed and, strife. And yes, we have a little friend has visited. You guys have been all kinds of treats today. Kat, Sarah Hale. Well, the reason why this little gentleman is here is because he's hungry. And it is almost 4 p.m. my time. So my husband probably fed him very early this morning, which means, 6 a.m. feeding time. We must eat long before 5. So, wow. What is coming up next in the Godeys, the Lady of Godey's? Chapter 12 is Thanksgiving Day. This is very interesting. And I read this probably last year around Thanksgiving. And so we're going to find out how Sarah Hale, she didn't invent Thanksgiving, but we're going to find out again as a reminder what she had to do with Thanksgiving. I think it goes back to the fact that she's again looking for national community. She's very patriotic. She's a person who believes in counting her blessings, I think. So, all right, buddy. Are we ready to wrap things up? Maybe, So, guys, have a wonderful week. If you are following us on Quilt Nerding, Jill and I will be on tomorrow night for the second part of the book that we're reading, To Honor and Comfort, which is turning out to be super interesting, very educational for me. It's about, Indigenous people in the U.S. and how, their quilting traditions and how they incorporated that with their traditional, methods and culture. So it's been a really interesting book so far. And then, I'll be back on Thursday, business as usual, and we'll find out about Sarah Hale and Thanksgiving. So I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon. Mwah, mwah, mwah.